Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Exit the Maze podcast. I'm your co-host, Scott Jones, along with Dr. Donna Marks, and we're here to talk about addiction recovery, and even overall wellness, and specifically with a focus on loving yourself back to health. So I think I said that properly, didn't I, Donna?
Absolutely.
There we go.
Learning how to love yourself, because most of us really don't know what that means.
That's a really big one there. And I know we've defined it before, and we've been doing these shows now. I'm not even sure exactly how many shows we've done, about 7 shows or so. But let's just redefine that just for if people are joining us now. The term loving yourself, I guess people could take that in a lot of different directions with a lot of different ideas. What is a good kind of like basic idea of what does it mean to love yourself, Donna?
Well, first, I'd like to talk about what it doesn't mean. And when we're talking about addiction, which is what our show is about, people think they love something. They love chocolate, they love alcohol, they love sex, whatever. And really, it's not so much that they love the feeling that it gives them. And so what happens is when someone doesn't feel full of self-love, that feeling is very powerful that they get from those outside sources, but it doesn't really fill what I call the addiction, the invisible hole. It doesn't fill it. It just makes it wider and wider and wider. So what I teach people how to do is to replace those things that they think they love with actual self-love. So we could take cigarettes, that's, that nicotine hits the brain and there's that sense of calm and relaxation and a little high. And so you can get that naturally by doing good things for yourself, going for a walk, planting a garden, playing music, painting, things that put you in touch with that inner higher self, and you'll feel that self-love. And the difference is that instead of having that negative consequence of, oh, why can't I quit smoking? Why am I doing this? Why am I eating? Why am I drinking too much? You don't have to try and control it anymore, and have that negative, awful feeling of being out of control and just giving up and not really even loving the feeling anymore. It gets to a point where you just have to have it. It's just this constant craving and never satisfied. That gets replaced with this sense of you feel good about yourself, you feel excited, you're doing other things instead of the addiction that do feel good, that do fill the invisible hole, and that do make you feel love for yourself and others.
Absolutely. We've got Scott Ricardis with us, wants to say good afternoon to the both of us. Good afternoon, Scott. Thank you for joining us. We've got others that I could see that are watching us, so thank you for joining in.
Yeah, we're very happy to have you.
Very happy. Please share this with your friends if you think this is a show that you think is worthwhile. Now, you made an interesting point. It's like a lot of people say, I'm in love with my drug. I'm in love with the alcohol. I'm in love with whatever the addiction might lead us to. But you're right. We're really in love with, or I guess sort of in love with how it makes us feel. Is that why it's so easy for people to jump from addiction to addiction? Because, if I'm out of cocaine and if you cut off my supply of cocaine, maybe I'll jump to heroin, or maybe I'll jump to something else. Because I just want that feeling, and it really doesn't matter where it's coming from.
Absolutely. And, that's the problem with treatment, is that they don't recognize the one addiction, that invisible hole. So someone goes to treatment for alcoholism, and then they wake up and they feel human again, and they tend to get on another addiction, maybe a pornography addiction, love and romance addiction, work addiction, so it just gets substituted. Somebody who quits smoking starts eating sugar like crazy, because tobacco is cured in sugar. So you have 2 addictions, nicotine and sugar. And so, if they quit eating, like I went from stopping smoking to wanting to eat more, which I didn't, because I wound up in extreme, bicycling and then marathons. And so it's just all the same addiction. And that's a problem. We need to address that in treatment. It's good to stop. It's good to address the underlying wound. It's absolutely essential to do that. But that doesn't take care of that invisible hole. In fact, sometimes that wound, that pain fills pain is an addiction too for a lot of people. When they're not feeling anything but that emptiness, they want something in there. So even though they may not be engaging in a substance use, they're going to try and do something to fill that void. So even pain, you take the trauma away and take the pain away. Who am I? What am I? So if they haven't been taught this self-love concept and specifically exactly how to love yourself from the time you wake up in the morning to the time you go to sleep at night, specific acts, specific behaviors that you're replacing the addiction with. Most people are going to be really.
That's the word you don't hear enough in treatment, Donna, is replacing. You don't hear replacing. What you hear a lot is we got to take away your bad habits. We've got to, even in some, and it is a shortcoming even in some self-help groups, if you will, turning it over, letting it go. But nobody's talking about what you're supposed to pick up, because we have to fulfill that higher hole in our heads, so to speak. Something's got to be in there. And if it's not going to be occupied with things that make me feel good, it'll be occupied with things that make me feel bad. I've got to fill that. So I can't just take away the thing that gives me the feelings that I've been chasing and not expect it to be replaced by something bad unless I make a choice to replace it with something good. Is that making sense?
Absolutely. That's exactly what we're talking about.
Why don't they? I mean, why does this sound like such a foreign concept? How do you expect to get rid of some bad habits, shortcomings, deficits, whatever you want to call it? Why do they assume that it's okay to leave a void? Because that's what they're doing.
We've just, addiction hasn't really been addressed first with alcohol and AA, and that, and then so treatment models followed that recovery model, which in my opinion is the best. But when that didn't work and people kept returning again and again to treatment, then they started now the medically assisted treatment where people are put on medication, in my opinion, whether they need it or not. When 30 years ago, when I first got sober, they waited, unless you were psychotic, they would wait before they administered medication. They gave your brain a chance to heal. And so the focus that I do when I'm working with people is how do we get your brain to heal? And that means, understanding where it's deficient, understanding where it's damaged from the addiction, and then to do all these loving things, nutritionally, exercise, socialize, interests, passions, finding your purpose, all these things help you in your recovery. And then, if people are not getting better, which I haven't seen anybody yet that didn't, then they will address medication. But now it's just standard. You didn't keep sober, we're going to put you on medication, either antidepressants and or Suboxone or Subutex or all these other things that are supposed to be temporary, but they're not, unfortunately. People are on them often forever. So they've just, again, transferred from one addiction to another. But they are functioning, most of them. They can function. So I guess that's better than not functioning. But I don't want to see people on drugs at all, because you're not yourself. You're not who you really are. You're not really fulfilling. And people that I've worked with on these medications, they have the same patterns over and over and over again. They can't seem to work, the judgment and the reasoning in that frontal cortex is still being under the influence of a drug, and they're not really fully engaged and engaging in their passion and their mission.
Artificially manufactured feelings and emotions and even cognitive thinking that's artificially manufactured through a drug are nowhere near what natural feelings and what you can get from yourself. Nowhere near. We're not let's make this clear. We're not anti-medication. We are absolutely not. There are people that need medications because of certain issues. What we are is we're anti. This should be the first answer for everything. We're definitely not about that. That as soon as you hit a hard spot, you put them on meds.
We're pro-healing. We're
pro-healing. And even things like Suboxone and methadone and those kind of things had a purpose to help with the detox, to help control and titrate people down so that they wouldn't crash. That's what it was meant for. And we're talking about, like, on the outside, 3 weeks of this stuff on the outside. And now we've got people on it for 7 years, and it's just how can you fulfill yourself if you're still living off of the artificial feelings?
Right.
It just doesn't make any sense, Donna.
It doesn't, and it's sad to me that, we become zombieated, so to speak,
Yes, good word. I like that. Zombieated.
And I find it very sad because I want everybody to be who they are, not some type of artificially induced monitored system of coping and of functioning, and that just can't happen when people are heavily medicated.
Do you think people are unrealistic sometimes when we talk about concepts of self-love? I have a feeling for some people that conjures up this feeling of every day's puppy dogs and roses and sunshine. But that's not what self-love is. It's not about being happy every minute of every day. Or am I
No,
wrong on that?
the result of loving yourself is that, if you look at children whose needs are met, they are happy most of the time, unless something bad
Sure.
happens and they cry or they get mad and then it's over. So we can get restored to that state when we do know how to love ourselves.
Yeah, and I think adversity is just not quite as devastating, and it's not quite when you're doing self-love, when you come across problems, it becomes a little bit easier because you spend more time in your happiness and in feeling good.
Right. It's easier to
The
accept.
adversity doesn't become the end of the whole world, you know?
Right. It's easier to accept reality that,
Yeah.
something is sad, and to allow yourself to feel those feelings and then to work through a healing process, whether with yourself or with someone. But it doesn't have to be damaging. It shouldn't be damaging.
Now, I know for me, I have an answer. I want to ask you, was there a point where or something that you did specifically where you kind of said, "That's what self-love feels like"? Was there something that happened to you or something you did where it was just kind of like it sparked something to realize this is what it really feels like?
Right. Well, after 23 years of sobriety, excuse me, and relapsing, and then just not understanding why my life wasn't working, why my relationships were like they were, and why I wasn't really feeling, authentic. And relapsing, I hit a bottom one night, and it was revealed to me when I was saying, why don't you love me, God? What's the matter? I've done this, and this, and this, and therapy and AA and everything I've ever been told, la, 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 la. And it became clear to me that wasn't, God that didn't love me. I didn't love myself. And so those of us that are raised in dysfunctional families who don't have a voice, we tend to lose our voice. And so finding it is the first thing in self-love. And the voice is two things. It's not only connecting spiritually to yourself, and when something doesn't feel right, to be able to talk about that from a healthy place, not an attack, but from a healthy place, and to try to work things out with yourself and other people, but to listen to that inner voice that guides us. And also then to be able to speak that out loud with love. So it's connecting to the inner voice and communicating from that place of love, not from attack or guilt or shame or anything like that.
Right.
That's just one aspect of self-love, but that for me was really difficult. It's still a challenge at times. I've gotten much better about it. I used to, hang on to things that weren't working, and I don't do that anymore. I have my relationships that are the closest to me. We talk about things, we work through things. It's uncomfortable for everybody, but when you do it from a place of let's heal this and let's get on track, it's not. It's very valuable. It builds trust, it builds intimacy. And really, I think that's what's lacking a lot also in treatment, is that we're not taught, bringing the whole family in. And that's what I do when I'm working with people. I bring in the whole family or the whole system. It could be a corporation, it could be a family, it could be brothers, sisters, whatever, to really get honest and to talk things out. and the things that come from that are really beautiful when people are willing. Some people aren't willing, and so they just walk out of the office or whatever, but at least you try. And
Right.
so that's the key in terms of healing all of that. And for me, it happened in that moment where I couldn't be a victim anymore. I couldn't. I got a very clear message. It wasn't anyone or anything that didn't love me. I didn't love myself. And so I had to learn how to do that. First, by really connecting to my intuition, to my higher consciousness, to my spiritual self, and listening to it. I heard a great example the other day of this. There was somebody on the news, and he was talking about he'd been a surfer his whole life, and he wasn't afraid of sharks. He knew his way around and what to do and what not to do. And he was going to go surfing. And rather than going to the normal beach, he was going to go to for some reason, he wasn't going to go there. I can't remember what it was. It doesn't matter. But he was going to go to this more isolated beach. And he heard this voice that said, that may not be a good idea. It's kind of isolated. And he just put his surfboard in the truck and went on to the beach. And he gets to the beach. And again, the voice says, this may not be a good idea. You don't have anybody with you. And if you get into trouble, you're screwed. And he said, again, he said, I hear you. It may not be a good idea, but it's a great surf and I'm going for it. I know the seals are out there. I know it's feeding season for the sharks. I've never had a problem. I know what I'm doing. As he's paddling out, again, the voice says, this may not be a good idea. There's a lot of movement out there in the water. And he goes, oh, it's just seals, I'm fine. So he starts surfing, and a great white knocks him off his board and bites his leg. And fortunate for him, and it does happen sometimes, the shark let go. I guess he realized it wasn't a seal. He gets back on his board, bleeding, paddles to shore, and winds up getting trauma hawked to the emergency room and stays in the hospital. But, we all have that voice. This may not be a good idea. Or sometimes it may be, this is a good idea. And sometimes, things are just what they are. So for us to be able to listen to that, though, I think is really key. That's one of the main components of self-love, listening to the inner voice of love. That's the spiritual part of it.
I love that story.
An emotional part.
I love that story because it shows how the obsession to do what you want to do can override the voice, which some may call your God voice, some may call it your common sense, whatever it is. It's your preservation saying, hey, let's take care of ourselves. And and we override that. And it's like, you could say the same thing. It's the same voice somebody might hear who is myself, who's trying to eat healthy. And when how's
that going, by the way?
I'm sorry?
How's that going?
It's going pretty well. I was on the road last week at a conference, and the choices were limited, so I didn't eat as healthy as I normally did, but I was very active, so there was a little bit of a different thing going on there. But I'm on track to get where I want to get. The on track, by the way, changed as I realized the reality of how this works. It doesn't work by doing it for a week and then your life changes. It works by changing your life, and then just one day it'll make sense. And it does. It's starting to make sense. But I love that story. I love that. You
mentioned last time we had the show how good it felt.
It feels good. It feels good to listen to that voice. To listen to that voice when I'm thinking, boy, I really want to go to the store. And when I'm actually at the store shopping, and I see the cookie aisle and the cracker aisle and the Doritos, I say, I really like those. And I'm able to walk by them and say, but you're not going to enjoy it. You really want them because it's a habit that you have, but you're not going to enjoy it because that voice is going to go, oh, the whole time I'm eating them, I shouldn't be doing this. And I'm going to feel bad. And I'm not in this to feel bad. So I found other things. I eat grapes. I eat bananas. I eat other things,
The next thing is to recognize what you're eating. I've been doing a lot of research lately on sugar, and it is such most of these cookies on the shelf and candy has high fructose corn syrup in it. And I recently read an article that it's really poisonous to your body. It can cause obesity. There's no nutritional value in it whatsoever. It can cause a fatty liver, which is, similar to psoriasis, and diabetes too. So it's just, and it's so addictive. The reason they're not just putting plain sugar is high fructose. It's like crack cocaine. The minute it hits your brain, more and more and more. So, this is like to be aware of, to remember that, the liver and the heart and the, blood and wanting to feel good and stay healthy because when we feel good and we stay healthy, then we feel that self-love.
I feel like there's enough natural sugars in fruits and vegetables,
Oh,
especially
definitely.
fruits and stuff, that I can satisfy that kind of like if I'd like to have something sweet. Again, my problem has never been a sweet tooth. I've been a carb person. I've been, you know,
Me too.
eat the big sandwich with the huge loaf of bread attached to it. Eat a whole box of crackers. Once you open a box of Triscuits, you're not allowed to close it. You have to finish it. Those kind of things.
Yeah,
So
I'm a carb person too, but I've
yeah,
learned to eat a measured amount of popcorn, eat one thing at a time, not a giant handful,
yeah.
and I enjoy it. Low
I
calorie, no side effects.
I do the popcorn now, and I do gourmet popcorn. So I
Oh,
use like,
definitely, go for it.
but I do like my own spices on it. I try different things, you
Nice,
know. So
very nice.
I'll mist it with a little olive oil just really quick so that whatever spice I put on there sticks to it. But it's a mist, and then I put like I love Old Bay seasoning on popcorn. It's fantastic. It's
Oh,
like
I
being
haven't
up in
tried that.
Maryland. It's
Yeah,
tasty. So there's all sorts of things. But that's all part of the self-love is doing things that how many times have we done things going into it knowing that we shouldn't be doing it? How many times have we been in the middle of doing something saying, I really wish I wasn't doing this? We've hurt people and immediately thought, I really don't want to hurt this person, but we do it anyway. And then we torture ourselves. And sometimes the self love is exactly what you're saying, Donna, is listening to that voice and trying to listen to our higher self saying, you really don't want to do this. You really don't want to be that person. You don't want to be that person nobody likes. You don't want to be that person nobody could trust. You don't want to be that person that hurts other people. And you don't want to do something where you're going to lay in bed tonight regretting that you did it.
exactly.
And that's a huge, huge thing. This is a class that should be taught in treatment centers. And
Yes,
guess what? This should be taught in grade school, for crying out loud, about self-love, about being true to
mhm.
yourself and not falling victim to the things around us.
Well, I think the best place to teach it is, from the moment of birth.
Yeah,
I have a
absolutely. Yeah.
one-year-old granddaughter, and she's starting to learn about those boundaries, and what's okay and what's not okay, and then, once she starts having little play friends, they're gonna hit each other, they're gonna bite each other, they're gonna strike out, but, we teach them, give it a word. Don't throw something, give it a word, and I wanna hear how you feel, but you can't throw a toy at me or anybody else, and you can't cuss at me.
Yeah.
And when you cry, I'll hold you and cuddle you and comfort you, and then you go out and play. You forget all about. You can't even remember what you were hurt or mad about 2 minutes later. And we're the same way. But what happens is we get so bundled up in so much pain and trauma over the years from child birth on that we're reacting to all of that whenever we get triggered. So self-love means we don't allow ourselves to come from the trigger. We come from the place of neutrality and love.
There was a story, and this is a true story. My son was a big kid, muscular, not like he worked out, just naturally he had size, and he was very strong. And he had fights when he was a little boy, just on the playground fighting or doing something like that. But I noticed even in sports, he wasn't aggressive with people because he didn't like hurting people. And he got into an altercation when he was in his late teens with a guy who was much bigger than him, and my son did not back down, and he put a hurting on this guy. He really did. I mean, it's just, and part of me is like, I'm going to say this is a horrible thing, Donna, but I'm just going to be honest. The dad part of you says, "Yeah, boy, kick ass."
Well, sometimes you have
But
to. Sometimes
but
you
yeah,
have to
and
fight that.
he didn't have a lot of choice in this. This guy was like, there was a
A
party.
bully. Sounds like he
This
was
guy
being
was going
bullied.
after him. He
Mhm.
was much older. He was going after my son. My son put an end to it. But he showed up at my doors. He had bloody knuckles from the fight, and he was crying. And he's probably going to kill me if he ever hears this. But he
He
was
didn't
crying.
want to do that, but he had to, and it hurt
And
him
he
to
was
do it.
crying because he hurt this other person.
Mhm.
He goes, I don't ever want to feel that way again where I'm standing over somebody who's hurting because I did that to him. And it was the most amazing thing. And at the time, it didn't register at me how important that moment was in his life. That he recognized that his actions hurt himself. And he never fought people after that. I don't know, he went into the military, so he had to learn certain things and do certain things, but I never saw him really fully aggressive towards anybody after that, because I think in that he listened, that voice in his head said, every time you hurt somebody, you're hurting yourself. And so it was a small lesson he learned, but it had a bigger impact on me watching what happened to him, you know? These are things that everybody needs to understand, this loving yourself. There's people out there without addictions, without mental health issues, that are just completely miserable and caught up in their lives in a way that they just have no self-care whatsoever.
Absolutely.
And just
Even
how
people in
nice would it
recovery,
be?
even people in recovery, we see it all the time.
Yeah. These people they got 20 or 30 years in recovery, and they're like, every day's a struggle. Well, why is every day a struggle? Why can't you be happy? What is it that you're not being fulfilled with? Because you know what? Your focus is still on all the things that you had to take away from yourself, and you never replaced anything. That's my theory. I don't know if that holds water, but you took away the alcohol, you took away the drugs, and they still see it as a loss and not as, but look what I gained, because they didn't
Right.
replace it with anything.
Right.
Which is the self-love that you talk about. And by the way, this is all in your book, which your new version is coming out in just another few weeks, right?
Yes.
Exit
Yes.
the Maze.
December 13th, the revised version. Very exciting.
That's cool.
It can be pre-ordered on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, just about any book site. It's available.
Did
They
you
can
add more
order it
pictures?
on my webpage, www.drdonnamarks.com. They can pre-order it there.
Absolutely. Please do that. Again, it's drdonnamarks.com. Very simple. You go there, you can pre-order it. I hope you added more pictures for people like me.
Forgot to put my phone on
It's okay.
airplane mode.
The funny thing is, mine was just ringing too. So somebody wants to get a hold of both of us. But this has been really good. I know you've got to make a mile today, and you've got to
I have to
travel.
drive over to Tampa, and I was sick a few weeks ago. I'm still not 100%, but it'll be nice. I'll put it quiet. I'll return some calls. Often I'm like talking to people like da 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 da, and I'll be able to return some calls and actually have a conversation and put on the music, and it'll get me in the zone. It always goes by really fast. And then I'm excited to be on the show tomorrow on Bloom TV, which is a local Tampa show. This will be the second time they've had me on. And we talked about kids and social media addiction, and we're going to be talking about sugar and Halloween and addiction. So that'll be exciting, and I can't wait to get over there and do it. And then my daughter's getting married this weekend, so I've got a big weekend too. So
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So before we leave, we got about 2 minutes left. This is a really good point, that you have all these things going on, and even though they're wonderful things, it could still create a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety, just all the things happening around us. How do you take moments, and maybe you can give people something that's actionable for them, Donna? How do you take moments where you could just step back and just kind of like do a self-check and be okay? What kind of things would you do in those circumstances?
Right. If I feel uptight, I right away, I'll close my eyes and take some deep breaths and connect to that inner voice right away. I get a lot more done when I'm calm. When that trigger in my mind, is stress. And there's one thing that stresses me, and that's running late. That's just running late. That really will stress me beyond anything. And so I don't run late. And if I do, I'm just like, let people know I'm running a little late, keep myself calm. And I wrote them. People again could find it on my website. I wrote a blog, find your own bio, rhythm, because we hear all this coaching, about time management and accomplishment and being successful and da 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 da. And we can pull from some of those things, but I think we all have our own biorhythms. And I think it's important for people to find their own. Not everybody's a morning person, and so
Right.
morning person, go with that. Don't force it. Because my brain is the most alert at night. And I can really crank out my writing and it's really crisp and clear. And I'm like, where'd that come from? In the morning, it's like, so,
I think it's important.
usually.
You made a great point, Donna, is you recognize that running late is something that triggers your anxiety. So, and so there's a solution to that. Don't run late. Part of your self-care is don't put yourself in that position. You're going into, you're going to be part of a wedding, and there's some people that arranging flowers just makes them crazy because it never looks right, and it drives them nuts, and then they can't get it. Then have somebody else do that, and you go do something else. Recognize the things, and if you are a morning person, great. If you're not a morning person, don't schedule your most important meetings of the day in the morning.
Exactly.
Do those things to take care of yourself. Don't put yourself in those harm's way, and then always take that few seconds.
If you have to, go to sleep early the night before.
Yeah, prepare for it.
So that you're not tired in the morning.
Just prepare for it, and if you know that it's a situation you're going to deal with, it's a little easier to prepare for. But
Absolutely.
definitely, like you said, close your eyes, deep breath. For me, if I step away from any situation for 5 minutes and listen to some music for 5 minutes, it could save me hours of anxiety. It's like, oh, absolutely. I'm too busy to stop aside for 5 minutes.
Because you're plugging into your higher power, and it's going to get you right off that, trying to control everything, trying to kind of track. So
self-love is not I love you myself. Not looking in the mirror saying I love you or kissing yourself in the mirror.
Yeah, that didn't work for me. It might work for somebody else.
You can do that if you want. No judgment here.
Exactly.
All I know is it smudges the mirror, and that I don't like. But self-love is about treating yourself on a daily basis and in all situations so that you are safe, you are protected, and you are doing what is in your best interest.
Yes.
And that's something you practice all the time. You just said it a few minutes ago. You've been doing this forever, and you're still learning and still practicing.
Yeah.
And you still got moments where you got to step back and say, almost let that one go. Got to kind of relax a minute. And so It's a process.
Absolutely.
But it's a great process, and I wish more people would teach it. Please exit the maze, pick up the book, go to drdonnamarks.com and order your copy of Exit the Maze. This talks all about how the industry really misses the most obvious answer to the addiction problem and trauma and a lot of other things, which is about caring for yourself and self-love. Donna, it's always a pleasure. Always.
Thank you. See you next week.
Next week, I want people to tune in because we're going to talk about Halloween.
Yes.
And yes, we can find a way to make Halloween about addiction. We will find a way.
Oh, for sure.
I know. We can ruin anything. Scott says thank you.
Or make it better. Make it better.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. For now, for Dr. Donna Marks, I'm Scott Jones. I want to remind everybody, please, throughout your day, make sure you do something nice for someone else and do 2 things nice for yourself. And that's always a formula to have a really good day. Thanks for joining us. We'll catch you next time.
Thank you.